Hey folks, welcome back to the DarkHorse Podcast live stream Q&A where cats are disappointed that they are not getting cream this week. But we had an incident last week in which a cat nearly threw up on camera and nobody needs that. So we are retooling our cat.
Everyone loses because of the behavior of one bad cat.
Yeah, I don't really blame him, but
no, I don't. But it's sort of apropos.
Yep.
The other cats are like, "What? We did nothing wrong. We've looked forward to our treats. What is going on here?"
What? All right. Well.
Yeah. Tons of good questions this week, guys. And as always, we will pick up a few of them next week, but we're not going to be able to get through as many of these as I would like. So we're just going to jump right into it, beginning with just a couple from last week. I see posts on social media making the claim that puberty blockers are completely reversible. This doesn't seem possible, but is there data on this? I do not have time to go look to see actually what the state of the literature is, but I can guarantee you, regardless of whether there's data sets or not, that puberty blockers are not completely reversible. I know it for sure, 100%.
Yeah, they can't be.
They can't be, 100%.
They can't be because development proceeds down different pathways based on what hormones are present in your blood. And so that period of time in which you have blocked the hormones that would be there or added hormones that wouldn't have been there will...
Well, two different things.
Right.
We're just talking about puberty blockers here.
I'm just saying in either case, the point is there's a developmental period in which there will be effects that are irreversible that takes place. So, it's a logical certainty.
Yeah. Yes. And, I have a lot more to say on this, but maybe we just leave it at that. If everything is, and unfortunately you can't wield that as a bludgeon because two evolutionary biologists said so, as opposed to here's the paper. But there's no way that this is going to...
As if here's the paper was actually proof of something.
Right. If everything is a subjective sociolinguistic construct, how can postmodern leftists claim with a straight face that their ideas are any more or less correct than others? I've never seen a postmodern leftist with a straight face.
I don't know what that means.
Just trying to slam postmodern leftists without actually saying anything, so they can't be like, "Did you hear what she said about us?"
Right.
We had it. Wait, what?
This person makes a good point. Yeah. I think many of us have realized this, and in fact, if you look inside of the literature of postmodernism, you will find that Derrida and Foucault, I believe it is Derrida and Foucault, each make this point, that effectively their point is this is a weapon. Their point is not that this is logically consistent, but this is used to destroy logical consistency in order to accomplish something. And
as they never said, more power to us.
Quietly.
Yes.
To themselves. But yeah, the very logical inconsistency you point to is there, and actually the degree of logical inconsistency across this entire landscape is so amazing once you begin to scrutinize things and try to take two ideas expressed in two different paragraphs and see how they live together.
Yep.
So anyway, that tells you the tale. These are not logical people attempting to accomplish something logical, even though they swear that they are.
Right. And people never lie. Do you think... Wait, what happened? Okay. Do you think that DMT being such a good fit for our receptors is an adaptation or just a coincidence?
It's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
I would say basically you have creatures using... So basically you have hormones and neurotransmitters are molecular signals that signal from one place to another. Neurotransmitters over very short distances, hormones over long distances. But in any case, the lock and key nature of these things allows messages to be transmitted. The messages can be altered, and the creatures that create hallucinogens often create them to disrupt the systems that are in communication with themselves, triggering anomalous thought patterns. So anyway, no, it's an evolution, it's an adaptation in the sense that either you've built a molecule to send a message that is meaningful, or some other creature has built a molecule to disrupt the meaningful processing of messages for two different reasons.
So I suspect, actually, did you say, I don't actually know enough about DMT. What's it from?
I believe there are several things that produce DMT.
Okay. Is it one of the toad
components,
ones?
I believe there's a toad.
Yeah. Okay.
Isn't it also one of the components in ayahuasca?
Yeah. In which case, it's one of a bunch of vines, or so.
Right.
Okay. So, I suspect, then that the question is what I suspect, I may be wrong, but what the person was actually asking is not on the toad or the vine end, but on the human end, right? So clear 100% an adaptation on the part of the organisms producing it, that it disrupts us. And I guess the answer therefore is that that it has to be.
It's like this.
I don't know how to spell it out.
If, let's say that your enemy figures out how to deploy a robot that pulls your accelerator pedal to the floor unexpectedly in your car, right? This works. It's not great,
Excellent.
but go with me. All right.
I'm going.
So your enemy has built this robot. The robot is an adaptation on the part of your enemy who's trying to hurt you by getting you to do something that you don't mean to do, accelerate when you don't want to, right? The accelerator is itself an adaptation for modulating the speed of your car to make it useful. And the point is, your enemy being hostile to you takes an adaptation that you yourself use to do productive things and causes you to harm yourself by triggering it when you don't expect it. So you've got a system that processes information with neurotransmitters, and then you've got a lot of things out there that, let's say that you decide, oh, that plant looks delicious, and you start to munch on the plant. The plant's interest is to get you not only to stop eating the plant, but to remember not to eat the plant in the future. And one way of doing that is to take your thought process, which is normally well-regulated and lets you know what's going on, and confuse it. So it's sort of like that.
Yeah. Again, something to talk about more. And actually, we do spend a little bit of time on entheogens in our book as well. How do we? This is from the Discord this week. How do we overcome the understandable distrust of poor and disadvantaged communities towards relatively well-off intellectuals such as yourselves, when cautioning against the dangers of radical societal change? It could be easy for them to misinterpret it as you defending the status quo and your own relative privilege at their expense.
Yep,
it's a good question.
Well, I would say, this is why we frequently talk about the fact that actually, even just, I hesitate to say objectively, but the political compass test is objective in one sense, right? The questions don't know who is being asked them,
right?
And they render a judgment across any set of answers. And the point is, look, yes, if we were trying to prevent the system from being changed, there are two reasons that we could be trying to prevent it from being changed. Either because we think change will make the system worse, or because we think change puts us at advantage and we'd like to protect that advantage. But that's not the argument we're making, right? Yeah. As progressives, we are both interested in positive change, and you don't have to believe us. We could be lying, but assuming we're not lying, if you ask us what system we would like to see emerge, one that is a great deal fairer than the one we've got. And actually, I think you and I would both agree that the system, while it does provide an awful lot of opportunity and a lot of it generates a lot of wealth, that the opportunities in it are very unfairly distributed. And, the fact that the zip code you're born into has a lot to say about what your, the ceiling of success that you are likely to run into might be, tells you that the system is not where it needs to go. And so, you can tell very clearly that we're not defending the status quo, because we're not advocating for the status quo, but we are advocating, don't make it worse. The fact that the status quo is imperfect is not an argument for destroying it, because it is far more perfect than the alternative chosen at random, So something like that. Yes, we would like to see a system that is better. What does better mean? It means produces more wealth, more fairly distributed, and is less destructive of long-term well-being.
Yep.
Assuming we're telling the truth about that, then it isn't the status quo that we're after.
Good. Okay, we have a number of comments and questions about Portland. And this first one is a question, and there are a number of questions in here, but I'm going to read the first one, we're going to talk to it, and then speak to it, and then I'm going to read just a bunch of them so that we get through them, and then we can riff a little bit on what we hear here.
Sure.
Okay. So this first one is: you speak as if the set of cleanup volunteers and the set of rioters are disjoint. How much overlap is there? What does it mean if the overlap is significant? That would be fascinating if it was actually the same people, and that would change what I think is going on a lot, but I see no evidence at all that there is any overlap. In fact, I think I counted 11 different volunteers that we saw today. And one of the last two, as we were walking back to our car, was actually wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And I commented to you.
Yep.
And I said, wow, that's a level. Oh, there's a spider on the table crawling up your arm.
Oh my God.
It's probably in your shirt now.
All right. I'm cool with this. I like spiders.
I don't. It's
on my sleeve, though. We're good. Let me know if you see it again.
Great. I'm the one wearing loose pants. I'm going to curl up my leg. Okay. It's a fast moving. So it came from here, so maybe it's done with me. Okay. There's someone, one of these volunteers was wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, and I said to you, that is a remarkable level of cognitive dissonance to be here cleaning up from the riots and then be proclaiming something that, really, I don't feel like any of the stuff that's going on at the literal rioting and looting level in Portland right now is actually Black Lives Matter. It's completely tightly joined, and it's confused. The anarchists and the looters and the vandals and everything have confused people and want that to be their branding, but I don't think it mostly is. But still, to be like, oh, I'm for this thing that claims to be doing this destruction, and now I'm out here cleaning up the destruction, seems like a level of confusion that I wouldn't normally expect. But really, no one else that I saw, was wearing any of the branding. But also, these mostly were either young, like high school, and like cleanly coiffed and sort of almost like preppily dressed, if that's even a thing anymore, like high schooler and college age kids. And then like middle-aged, there were a couple of middle-aged Asian women, and it's not the same people who are out there.
Yeah,
we weren't out there last night, but we've been out there in other times, and it was totally different from the people who were hanging out outside their tents, feeling being however they're being. Like, it's not them either who's doing any of the cleanup.
Right.
I don't know if they were involved in the rioting either.
Zero reason to expect overlap.
Yeah.
I do wonder, given your point about who was doing cleanup, if something has caused those with a public service requirement in high school or something to end up.
There were two different sets of t-shirts that I saw on the volunteers, as if there are two different organizations, NGOs of some sort, non-governmental organizations of some sort, who are sending out people to clean up.
Yeah.
The younger people, I don't remember, I'm going to have the pictures, but I don't remember offhand. I think they were wearing the one type of shirt, and then a bunch of the other people wearing something else. So there might be. Yeah. I will say, there might be that.
One of the things, I didn't capture it this morning, but one of the things that disturbs me most about the wanton destruction is how frequently things like trash cans are destroyed. And I think the point is, the instinct is to turn Portland into a mess. Mm-hmm. It is completely antithetical to the impulse to clean up after the mess, right? So the idea, anybody who likes Portland to be a nice place wants there to be trash cans that get emptied, because then there isn't trash all over the place. So, do you want homeless people to have a better quality of life? Trash cans contribute to that.
Yes.
Right? So, there's just no argument that this is complex. These are people who just see structure as antithetical and have set about destroying it, and those who would set about cleaning it up, whatever their impulse, it is different.
Yeah. So just a few comments here, and several, and we'll riff. One person says, I went downtown for the first time in over a year, and my heart broke because I saw what they've done to my city. It's childlike, misdirected anger.
Yep.
I saw your street photos and felt I was watching guilty Portland parents cleaning up after their poorly raised and riotous offspring. Are they enablers? If a rioter breaks a window in the forest and no one is around to fear it, are all cops still bastards?
That is philosophical.
Portland might not have all its ducks in a row, but its cats better get in line. This is a little worrying. I just want everyone to be aware that the insanity on the left has started screenshotting Superchats and using it as a weapon against the talent. I don't know what the evidence for that is, but that's not good.
I don't even know what that would mean, but it doesn't sound good.
Yeah, I mean, I see.
Oh, I get it.
I see very little in our super chats that are bad, but
okay, got it.
Please start a movement to stop cleaning up after riots so people deal with the consequences. Merci, love you. Former story time here. I'm not sure what story time is. And then 2 more, and then we'll talk about any of these we feel like talking about. I appreciate your covering the riots in downtown PDX, Portland. As a resident of downtown, I find that most Portlanders are willfully, ignorant of what is really going on in our city. Yeah, I think so. One more. Why does the left media and Black Lives Matter martyr men who have been criminally violent towards women and then never mention the charges? And that's, a little bit different. And so let's definitely get to that one. But anything from all of those interesting and diverse comments about Portland. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about it, and I always appreciate hearing from people who are well familiar with Portland, who are here.
Yeah.
And, we actually, was it like 4 or 5 people that recognized us when we were down there today? And that was intriguing. Of course, people who are interested in what's happening to Portland, who live here, are likely to have gone down and likely, right? So, it's certainly not a random sampling, but.
No, but when we moved here, so getting recognized as a phenomenon of life, pretty rare, but Portland was the place it used to happen least when we moved here, least of anywhere we traveled. Mm-hmm. And so I do think people are tuning in more locally, which is great. The issue of people not really knowing what's going on in Portland, even people who live here, is, I think, huge. And it's not an accident.
Yeah.
Part of it is COVID has meant that people who might be downtown more frequently don't go. But there has been a concerted effort, which I've watched on the Portland subreddit, to portray reports of mayhem as false, as, slanderous.
Yeah.
And they're not, right? The mayhem is real. And in any case, there's also an instinct to look away, right? For those, especially people who initially were excited about Black Lives Matter because they didn't read the fine print, right? Those people have been rationalizing ever crazier, ever more disconnected behavior. And it does result in this sense of like, why are we not, why is Andy Ngo the source of information on what's going on with the rioters, right? Now, I like Andy quite a bit, but the point is everybody should be fascinated by what's happening in a major American city, and instead the press is complicit in not reporting it. And so what we have is
you don't mean, why is Andy Ngo doing this? Like, why aren't there 20 Andy Ngos?
Right.
So that we can get, we literally, our 17-year-old son's friend happens to be there last night, and we're showing video from him, why is that where we're getting video? Why isn't there actually journalism being done?
Right. There's no journal. And in fact, I went
because we're not journalists. We're not pretending to be journalists.
Right. Yeah. It's not our job. But but the fact is there is a journalistic vacuum surrounding what's taking place. And what is reported in such strange ways, right? So I went looking for information on the mural that was painted on the Apple Store, because I wanted to make sure that Apple hadn't commissioned it, which I was sure they hadn't, but I wanted to make certain.
Yeah.
And if you look at the reports, they're deliberately ambiguous, right? This person chose to effectively graffiti the wall that Apple had put up to cover the broken windows. Now, it happens they did an artistically cogent job.
Right.
But that shouldn't matter. The point was, maybe we decide that we like this mural, but the point is somebody still decided to violate the law and put up a mural that spoke to their beliefs and not our beliefs, not Apple's belief, right? They chose to spray paint a wall. And anyway, in the reports, you have to read really carefully to figure out what actually happened, how that mural ended up there. So anyway, yes, there's a completely bizarre field of distortion around all the stories.
Probably the people who are in or around Portland who are watching this have done this, but I actually encourage people to spend time downtown in particular. We haven't gone back at night since the regular riots stopped. I just went down maybe a couple times, and I think you went down 1 or 2 times more than that. But I have gone downtown many, many times in the daytime. And depending on if something just happened the last night, I may park up actually at the Japanese Garden, which is a fair ways away, and walk down, just so I don't have to worry about is my car going to be vandalized, by the time I get back to it. And it's always changing, and it's fascinating every time. It's an education every time. The number for a while there in the end of the summer, if I got downtown by between 9 and 10:30 in the morning, I always saw shopkeepers out on the street cleaning up the mess from the night before. And it's not that shopkeepers don't normally make sure to keep the sidewalks in front of their stores particularly clean, but this was a different level of cleanup that they were being required to do effectively in order to present a welcoming storefront that really should not have fallen on them. Right. Especially in these times when so much has already fallen on small businesses. And I will say, I hate this trope. I've always hated it since long before the pseudo left has been using it. But I'm just so tired. I just can't do anything. I'm just so tired. Most people use this and then stop doing all the stupid things you're doing and get some rest, and then do the things that you actually want to do and stop using this as an excuse. Right now, people are legitimately exhausted because of COVID. People are legitimately exhausted, and I do think that there are some number of people who, if they went downtown and they saw it, they would know something different than what they currently know, but they just cannot bring themselves to, and it is about 13 months of unprecedented pandemic horribleness at all levels.
Well, I think there's an added factor. I've always been struck by the odd phenomenon of being embarrassed on someone else's behalf. Right? When you see somebody do something embarrassing and you feel embarrassment on their behalf, and your instinct is to kind of obscure what they're doing, and and I have the sense that this is so,
because we believe in the dignity of human beings at some level,
right? And this is shameful, right? As a Portlander, I want to be proud of Portland, and there's a lot that's marvelous here, but I'm ashamed of what Portland is doing. I'm ashamed that Portland is allowing this to happen,
right?
And so I think many people who don't have our role are looking away because it makes it less bad, except it doesn't. What it means is that actually they're getting hoodwinked, that you've got a lot of people who are basically just misanthropic. And to allow the misanthropes to rule, to create a bailout fund and all of this, it'd be hard if you looked at what they're doing, if you looked at what they spray paint on the walls, right? It's hard to imagine what would move you to want them bailed out. Right? I want them to suffer enough that they stop.
Yeah. They're advocating murder.
Yes, they're openly advocating murder with a literal smiley face.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and so what finally on this topic, at least for this set of questions, why do we see the martyring of men who have actually been engaged in violence against women? I feel like we've talked about this a little bit. Certainly we have, but I think we've talked about it some on air before. And this is one of the things for me that just sort of tears the facade off.
Yeah.
It's you don't care about women,
right?
You don't care about fill in the blank. You don't care about any number of these things that you say you care about, unless it serves your particular goal in the moment, and then you can make a claim that that's what you care about. But no, it's true that there have been a number of men who have died at the hands of police, who have been separately engaged in criminal violence against women, there was one New York Times front page story, I think, which just spun the story of this guy. I can't remember any of this because I don't know which story it was, but just buried what should have been the lead, which was actually here this person had been criminally violent.
Just the guy who
I don't remember.
Okay, well, we'll stay away from it.
Yeah.
The particulars. I think I know which story you're talking about, and yes, the contrast between the actual story of the individual and the valorized version of the story that was presented to the public was amazing.
We kind of hate There are wrongful deaths at the hands of police, for sure. We can stand against that strongly and fiercely. Why would we valorize criminal behavior?
Well,
why would we do that?
So I want to spin it a little bit.
Okay.
Or not spin. I want to
twist
look at it differently.
Turn it something.
Here's the problem. And, Eric has done a thing where he's called the phenomenon optical lynchings, where basically the point is if something happens that can be portrayed as the equivalent of a lynching, then it is grabbed onto, irrespective of whether the facts actually add up, right? And so if it looks like a cop has murdered somebody, then that's good enough, because what we're really looking for is something symbolic. We're not looking for a factual case. The point, though, is in a world where you've got people, let's say that they earnestly believe that police-based, racially motivated injustice at the hands of police is a rampant problem, right? They are looking for examples to point out what we all know is taking place. And the point is, how many of these examples have to turn out to be not at all the way they were portrayed for us to conclude the obvious thing, which is that the case in which a truly innocent person, a truly unarmed person, is gunned down in cold blood, right, is actually rare, right? And so I guess of
those cases, the number of those cases that have a racial component is more rare.
Right. So I think the point is the question is actually pointing at the elephant in the room, which is it is the rarity of cases that are truly clean and in which there is no ambiguity like this that causes the cases which are so compromised by the behavior of the individual who's being valorized to be so prominent.
Yeah, I mean, we probably don't want to spend a lot of time here. There's a messiness here, of course, because I'm reminded in that argument of argument that it's hard to bring a rape case against a guy if his victim wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
Right. If she, especially if she was a sex worker, but if she simply, had a lot of hookups, if she, like all of these things, right? And the fact is that rape should be rape, with the understanding that a whole lot of things are being called rape that aren't actually rape. But like rape is rape, and it shouldn't matter whether how the rest of the world views you and whether or not that should have happened to you.
Well, I mean, I agree with your point, but I think the thing is there's a difference between somebody whose record is imperfect, in which case I do think it is fair to ask the question, what disadvantages resulted in the person's criminal behavior. On the other hand, rape is a special crime, right? Abuse against an individual, right? Sexual assault against women is a crime against an individual.
Yeah.
And the point is that if the allegations are true, then the point is, okay, this person you're valorizing actually harmed somebody egregiously, and they had a choice. It wasn't that they stole to feed a family. They actually engaged in sexual violence against an individual human. They don't deserve to be valorized. This is a kind of crime for which there is no excuse.
Yeah, so it doesn't justify police violence, but there's certainly no excuse for valorization of the individual.
Right,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Happy birthday, Zach. Change of subject. Also, many thanks to Zach for clarifying my question about right to repair from the 30th Q&A live stream. So, Zach, you may know what he's talking about there.
I do remember it.
All right. Change of pace here. What are we at time-wise, Zach?
You are at 30 minutes exactly.
Okay, so we got a ton more great questions, so we're going to read at least a few more of them before switching to this hour's questions. People who have been fully vaccinated can still spread the virus? ? True? Are there other examples of this outside of COVID? It seems like more scare tactics. So this is something just got stated today, right? Was it Fauci? Was it the WHO? I don't know. Someone just said this.
Well, this is apparently true, as far as I know. It's not all that rare, because vaccines are essentially never perfectly successful in preventing disease.
Okay, but
Yeah.
It seems to me that you just conflated two things. If you are vaccinated and you can't get it, can you spread it?
No.
So then, so you what you said seems like it conflates these two things, and what Fauci or the WHO or whoever's saying this thing, they're not being clear.
Well, the evidence is clear, right? So,
Well, I hope that's true. Like every time I've tried to go down this particular rabbit hole, I can't distinguish between these two possibilities because they're not sharing it. So
Here's-
like if they are claiming that somehow this magic virus and this magic vaccine are combining in such a way that if you're vaccinated, you can't get the thing, but you can still spread it.
No.
Like I don't know what planet we live on, and I really want to see what those data look like. But
that's not what anybody's saying.
okay.
You can get it if you had the vaccine. You can get it, and you're much more likely to be asymptomatic because one thing that the vaccine seems very good at is reducing the severity of disease, which also reduces the degree to which you are likely to transmit it because, of course, your symptoms are a matter of the virus producing.
On the other hand, being vaccinated, you're less likely to be taking the same kinds of precautionary measures to avoid spreading. And you are going to think that you're immune to it because you were vaccinated. And, we did a whole takedown of that crap paper on asymptomatic spread being really, really common.
Yeah.
But we still don't know. Like, we just took down that paper. We don't know to what degree asymptomatic spread actually can happen. It's clearly less than symptomatic spread.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we don't know. And so if you've got vaccinated people who assume that they're now immune, who's small proportion of them are not, but are behaving as if they are, they will be, if they do get it, they will be more likely to spread it than if they had not been vaccinated, actually, because they presumably would have been behaving differently.
Yes, and the frightening possibility here is if you have been vaccinated, you have been vaccinated against the original version of the spike protein, which means what are you likely to get? What is likely to get around the immune system's vaccinated state is a variant. Therefore, if you spread it, what are you likely to spread? Some variant for which the vaccine is not.
It's selective pressure for a vaccine avoidant virus.
Exactly. Which again, welcome to the arms race.
Right. Cool. Clearly, cultural institutions like the ACLU and most universities. Clearly, cultural institutions like the ACLU and most universities were up for sale and bought by billionaire philanthropists, making honest academics, scientists, doctors, journalists, lawyers, etc. hard to come by. Just a comment, but...
yeah, I don't think that's exactly how it happened. I think there's a much more organic process.
Well, I think, up for sale is in quotes here, and I think up for sale can mean a lot of different things. It can look a lot of different ways.
There's a lot of ways.
There's a lot of capture that can happen without there being a placard on the door saying, come buy us.
Right, or without anybody consciously attempting to do it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Someone is asked how they'll handle a trade-off of two risks. They'll respond, this one risk is bad. No mention of the other risk. Can we come up with a succinct term for this non-answering tactic? I love this question.
Yeah.
I would love for us, and it's possible it exists. So I'm just going to read it again so it's clear what we're at. I would love to have a term for this, and maybe you've already got it. So if you're asked how to handle two risks, or someone, we'll call him Alan, is asked how he'll handle a trade-off between two risks, and Alan's like, well, I really don't like that one. Like, Alan, you got anything else? Like, you got anything for me? No. Alan just totally ignores the second risk. And this person, Phil, asking the question, not Alan, says, can we come up with a succinct term for this non-answering tactic?
Well, I'm tempted to say one-sidism.
One-sidism.
Because both-sidism is an accusation that gets leveled at those of us who try to make arguments about how something fits in context. So, there is... whatever the answer to the question is an excellent one. This is a repeated problem. And, it's a kind of, if it's willful, it's sophistry, because what it does, it's very hard, if you're trying to balance the risk of, your building burning down versus the risk of, I don't know, being unable to escape from it or something. By focusing on one argument, it's very hard to make a counter argument, right? Are you for buildings burning down, right? So it distills something down to an argument that is strong, but the point is the argument is weakened only by the fact that there is an argument in an inherent conflict with it on the other side.
Yeah. So a sort of a DSM style term would be sophistry : one-sided variant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm trying to think, can we come up with a really good example? I'm trying to figure out what example we can use as sort of the type specimen.
I mean, I just feel like it happens all the time. You get people saying, "Well, if you're talking about X, that means you don't like."
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't come up with anything right now out of context.
It will occur to us.
But
later.
I feel like it's all over the place.
Yeah, it is all over the place.
So I don't feel like that's the hard part here at all. The hard part is the succinct terms. So I'd love to come back to this. I don't know if we will remember to, because we always have so many things, but I'm going to at least highlight this. With my synaesthesia, 2 is blue, 5 is red, and 0 is white. The first digit is blue, so the number is mostly blue with faint overtones of the other colors. Is synaesthesia adaptive, and what might its function be?
Oh, you're going to love this. This is, I believe this is David Eagleman's work. I certainly learned of it through him. But it turns out that the synaesthesia thing where numbers have colors to them it's so gorgeous, is apparently at least largely the result of toys that associate numbers with colors, like sets of blocks that have colors on different sides.
Those foamy floor mats.
Yeah, foamy floor mats, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds like somebody's porn name, but...
It's really bad porn. I mean, it all is, but my God.
But sure.
No, but if you've been a parent in the last, probably 30 years, those floor mats with the numbers that come out of them.
Yeah.
But I have great respect for David, and I don't know if this is his work. I know you love this hypothesis, and it sounds like there's evidence for it, but I don't know. It feels wrong. It feels incomplete to me.
It may be
in part, and this is where like the lived experience of the personal anecdote is like, yeah, but I don't think that explains what happens for me. Therefore, and so I'm not saying it's wrong, but I think it's incomplete in part because I'm fascinated by synaesthesia, and there's a great novel, I have to look it up, about synaesthesia that I loved when I read it, that I'll try to remember to look up here. When I was actively thinking about it a lot, and I had exposure to a lot of college students, I would ask people, and a lot of people report mild levels. And, it's not clear, if you're reporting mild levels, like to what degree you're just sort of clinging to vestiges of childhood or whatever. But there was never any pattern. Like I actually took notes for a while, and I wouldn't know where to find them now. But I'm like, what colors people associate with what numbers? And, age cohorts, geographic cohorts, like there was no pattern to what numbers and colors associated. And so that made me skeptical. On the other hand, maybe there's so many different block sets and foam mats. I don't know.
Totally. I do think I hesitate to say sure without knowing the paper in question, but I do believe this was a properly tested hypothesis that withstood test. I also think David had synaesthesia. Or maybe still does. So anyway, an insider for whom this resonated and who has the relevant expertise, I certainly take very seriously. But it's certainly an interesting explanation. Whether there are multiple explanations seems likely that there would be.
And I mean, and that's also a very narrow form. So is synaesthesia adaptive? Like I said, I feel like it's the separating out of the senses that we experience as we age that's actually kind of like a sensory apoptosis. I actually kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
So apoptosis is programmed cell death, effectively. Like, you start out with effectively webbed fingers, and then the cells, the tissue that you don't need between your fingers over time during development goes away, and you end up with and we have this overproduction of neurons in the developing brain in the same way, and then a pruning down during early development, like through the ages, well, through adulthood really, but especially early in childhood at a couple of different distinct moments in childhood. And it's not that it just, there was just too much. It's like, no, actually more connection is better, like more plasticity, more capability is better early on. And then you do get, the term is canalized. You basically go down particular canals. And I feel like everyone has some kind of synaesthesia, whether or not they've recognized it or not, early in childhood. And many of us retain at least a sort of facultative ability to find it, even if we don't like. I feel like I can find a lot. I can experience synesthetic things, and it's like entheogens on call at some level.
Yeah.
But it never comes unbidden. And true synesthetes, they live in this world where, for instance, 2 is blue and 5 is red and 0 is white. But that, I feel like that's just less canalization. Like, you're still more plastic, and having some people in a population that have more plasticity in any realm, and in this case, it's sort of sensory failure to fully separate the senses, will have value.
Yeah, I agree. I also like the idea of, what did you call it? Cognitive apoptosis?
Sensory apoptosis.
Sensory apoptosis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something quite right about this, that in childhood you draw too many connections, you see things as related too easily, and that allows you to discover, productive ways of thinking that involve pruning down. So I think it is very much that process. There is a savant. So in general, savants have extraordinary abilities and extraordinary deficits coupled. There's one savant, a mathematical savant, who is a synesthete. There's a documentary about him. I'm trying to remember his name.
It's not late Russian mathematician Vladimir I. Arnold, is it?
Oh, no.
Because that's the next question.
No, it's not him.
Okay. Too bad.
Anyway, it's a British guy.
Okay.
Who appears to have he's got some quirks, but no major deficit and extraordinary mathematical capacity. And anyway, so it at least suggests that synesthesia can be compatible with extraordinary capability. But I would say in general, if everything we have discussed here is true, then synesthesia in adults is not in and of itself adaptive, but it can be part of adaptive ways of thinking. If it was adaptive, you would expect it to be universal. So it's
no. If it's adaptive in some circumstances, or if it's adaptive to have the variation, which was the argument I was making, just like left-handedness, it's adaptive for some small fraction of the population to be left-handed.
Okay, so it could be a lineage level adaptation.
Right.
At the individual level, probably not, but it is compatible with adaptive ways of thinking.
Right. Okay, have you guys heard of the late Russian mathematician Vladimir I. Arnold? I sensed similar sentiments regarding the nature of science and how to go about learning it from some of his writings. May I recommend Arnold's Swimming Against the Tide? I don't know him, but we'll look into it. Yep. Next one. Another lizard that's not a lizard is New Zealand's Tuatara.
A beakhead.
So I just needed to, because here, Zach, just show my screen here. I, of course, have a slide from a previous lecture on, wow, that's terrible.
We are working without a net.
She always abandons us.
Yes, again, she didn't show for work.
Yeah.
5 more seconds.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Oh, I didn't mean for it. So, Tuataras, also known as beakheads, also known as rhynchocephalians.
Yes.
Tuatara is the Maori for, I had it here somewhere. Oh, I lost it. Oh, it's on a different Tuatara slide of mine. Is Maori for spiny back, I think, is what, Zach, can I have my screen back? And yeah, it's the genus Sphinodon, spines on back. And they are indeed not lizards, but they are sister to the squamates. So they're a strain. Oh, did I show a picture? Oh, yeah. Is this the picture I just showed? I think it is. This is a different one.
That's a different picture.
And I just screwed up this thing. Oh my God. Okay. This is a different picture, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh, so I was showing the wrong picture entirely. Okay.
Explains why I couldn't make it out.
Okay. Here, this is the one I meant to be showing. God damn it. Nothing is working. That is a Tuatara there. And they sure look lizardy, right?
Yep.
They definitely have scales, etc. But here, we don't need all the details, but they are not lizards. And in part, we can tell that because unlike lizards, they don't have two penises. They don't have hemipenes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In this case, the fact of them not being lizards,
it's really close.
It's a bit arbitrary because the basal lizard was lizard-like. And so we could just include we could arbitrarily have decided to call the larger group that includes Tuataras lizards.
Yeah. I'm looking for a tree now. I've got all sorts of trees with all sorts of extinct reptiles, and that won't do it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
You're
Didn't think Tuataras were going to come up today, but here they are.
Stop talking about squamates. Which type of questions arise more naturally in you? Is it a what something is or a how did something come to be, whatever you think it is? Thank you for the podcast, by the way. I look forward to your next episode every Sunday. Very much a how and why. So what is really just a definitional like identity thing and easily determined and not that interesting. How questions are interesting, and a lot of the research that's done now is based on how questions, sort of levels of questions of mechanism. How does the heart function? How does the bird migrate? How does skin regrow after it comes off? But why questions are really the evolutionary questions, the so-called ultimate levels of analysis. Why do birds and mammals both have four-chambered hearts? Why do birds with long childhoods have more efficient migrations than birds with no relationship with their parents? It's true. Why? I don't remember what was the other thing. Skin. I don't have one for skin.
I would say I'm also thoroughly animated by why, but I do also have a fascination with the border between the how and the why.
Mm-hmm.
There is something to be said for thinking in mechanistic terms in order to deduce the answers to the why questions. To give an example, early on in COVID, you and I were both struck by the fascinating fact of viral load in a room predicting the likelihood of catching COVID, and the idea that even in a room in which there was COVID, if you were there briefly or the windows were open, that somehow you wouldn't cross some threshold, which does not fit with the model of immunity that we call acquired.
Mm-hmm.
But it does fit pretty well with innate immunity, where you have a certain number of cells capable of doing generalist immunological work that become overwhelmed by the number of particles they encounter. So as long as you remain below some threshold, your innate immunity works really well. So in any case, the point is the fact that things didn't fit with the model of immunity that we typically think about raises a question about what else might be going on at the mechanistic level underneath that is worth thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that there's a very rich answer to the question. So anyway, I love those things.
Yeah.
And I will say, I think evolutionary biology has been slow to wake up to mechanism for totally arbitrary historical reasons, which were when evolutionary theory began to be vibrant, starting with Darwin. We didn't have the tools to look into mechanism below a certain scale. And so evolutionary biologists got used to thinking purely phenomenologically and not at all mechanistically. And then when the study of mechanism caught up, because suddenly we had all of these great tools, there was sort of a loss of interest, or the interest didn't arise because it didn't sound interesting in evolutionary terms, but that the interface really often is very interesting. And I wish both sides cared about it more.
Very good. One more question here, and we'll pick up some of these next time before moving to this hour's super chat. Why has any discussion of the vaccine nanoparticles disappeared? Did anyone discover how the particles break down in the body? Could they be causing the clots? I think, and I did not look into this, but I think that the clots are mostly happening with the DNA vaccines, the AstraZeneca and the J&J vaccines, although, 6 and 6 million is not, was it clots? Was it 6 and 6 million, 6.7 million or whatever? Was it clots? Anyway, that's a whole other story. Anyway, the DNA vaccines don't have the nanoparticles, the lipid nanoparticles, which is part of why we were more excited about those. They still have the novel mechanism, a novel mechanism, but they don't have two novel mechanisms as the mRNA vaccines do. So I don't know if clots have been associated with either Moderna or Pfizer. Stuff has been associated with them. I don't trust that we're seeing actually what the data are and what kinds of symptoms, just on an anecdotal level, I've heard from a ton of people who report like really severe rashes that don't go away, for instance. And I don't see that in the press. So why has any discussion of the vaccine nanoparticles disappeared? We're not allowed to criticize these, I think, is the basic terrible answer.
Well, I
don't think we figured out what they do.
No, I don't think we figured out what they do.
What the particle breakdown in the body is.
My guess is there's not enough particles for the breakdown in the body to have much consequence. It's not impossible.
Yeah, it's not going to be breakdown so much.
But here's the thing that I never hear discussed. The mechanism by which the RNA vaccines enter the cell is new. So too will be the distribution of cells that are entered and the reaction of the immune system to them. In other words, I think that a lot of the novel symptoms that we are seeing are likely to be due to the haphazard way in which a bunch of RNA dumped into the body inside these nanoparticle envelopes ends up entering cells and causing some tissue, therefore, to malfunction to some degree, right? So the point is you're dumping these things into the system very imprecisely, right? You're injecting them intramuscularly. And that means that they will disperse in some way, and some fraction of the cells they encounter they will enter, and those cells will start making spike protein and exporting it to their surface. And the point is, well, what symptoms would you expect? And the answer is I'd expect a bit of chaos.
Yeah.
That's not a very precise system.
Yeah.
Right? You're not introducing it into a particular place where the cells then pick it up and do something very coordinated. You're dumping enough into the system that enough cells pick it up, that it results in enough of the immune system encountering it that you get a robust immune reaction that creates memory. But this is like, this is a bunker buster bomb, right? It's not a precision response. And how we discuss.
Yeah, the lipid nanoparticles are the armor.
Right.
So that the RNases, I'm not pronouncing that right, basically that are circulating constantly, don't get to the RNA before it can get inside a cell. And so the armor is then just left in pieces floating around the body and hopefully collected and discarded. But
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think actually it's going to get integrated into cell membranes, right? And like plastic microparticles in fishes. Well, at some level, the surfaces of these cells are lipid, which is why the lipid envelope works, right? It's sort of like two bubbles fusing together. But you're doing this almost at random with respect to tissue. And
are the lipid nanoparticles more or less coherent under certain types of stress, right? Like, at the point that you get heat shock, for instance, are they going to be more resistant and therefore the cells won't lyse when they should, or, less resistant? Like, there's just all sorts of possibilities.
Yep.
And we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know.
That's the answer.
Unfortunately, that's the answer. Okay. Next question. A school in Australia made the boys apologize to the nearest girl for the behavior of men. Justified by the idea of ubiquitous male culture making all men responsible for the actions of a few. Does such a culture exist?
I don't understand that last part.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Justified by the idea of a ubiquitous. I think what is being asked is, this was justified by this idea of a male culture that is ubiquitous, in which men are, all men are toxic basically, and no, it doesn't. There will be some moments in history in some cultures under times of extreme stress and war when all men are called upon to become toxic, right? Like that will happen, but that's about as close as I can get.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Men and women are part of the same culture, and there can be subcultures in there that travel one route or the other. But
yeah,
not all men are toxic. Obviously, that has become a cliche, but it is important to say it in this context. And frankly, those kids are due an apology.
Yes, they are. Yeah, all of them. The boys and the girls.
Yep.
Yeah. And an explanation,
Yeah.
not just an apology. I don't, because obviously apologies have become weapons, and they aren't actual apologies, and we need to also resurrect apology as a powerful and necessary force for human interactions, because this thing where you just apologize when the mob comes for you and hope that it goes on to the next victim is not really an apology, and it's moving the mob to the next victim is all it's doing. Externalizing the mob, and so most people now know that an apology isn't an apology, and we need it. We need it. And if the thing comes for you and tells you that all you need to do is apologize and it'll go away and it'll make nice with you, don't believe it and don't apologize. Don't do it. It's part of what we did at Evergreen, right? And in fact, I think, we refused to do any sort of non-disclosure agreement. And the very first thing they asked for us when we got into mediation was an apology from us. And we're like, I think we're done. Like, what are you doing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. I don't see a way out of this that does not include giving law enforcement permission to kill rioters. Please tell me why I'm wrong. Florida made it okay to run over protesters blocking roads. What are your thoughts?
We can't do this.
Yeah.
But the fact is, there are tactical things you could do. It is impossible to do what is necessary in the case of an anarchist force that is trying to precipitate violence against them in order to justify more of this. So we can't.
Well, I'm reminded of a conversation you had early in the protests and riots with someone who was I can't remember, police or military who'd been called in, who was saying they're taking all of our non-lethal methods of enforcement away from us.
Yeah, he was federal police.
That's right. And first, before you even start to think about going there, give the police back all of their non-lethal tools.
Yeah, not non-lethal, they're less lethal, and that does mean,
Well, tear gas isn't lethal. Yes, also
it's not especially lethal. Let's just say I don't like the idea that we are held to non-lethal. You've got people who are destroying civilization, and the fact is, it makes sense to use tools that allow the law to be enforced and do not do more harm than necessary. But you can't let the fact that they're going to do some harm stop you. And the fact is, I would be shocked if tear gas had never killed anybody. Just the simple fact that it's stressful on the body is dangerous to some people. That's
fine. The fact is, if they were calling for defunding the police, and they effectively did, and they managed to, at least in Portland, get rid of most of the lesser kinds of control tools that the police normally would be using, and no one said you also need to disarm the police, because frankly, even the assholes who were leading this thing knew what would happen then if it was understood that the police had literally no arms. And so what they're left with is their arms. What they're left with is their most lethal tools.
Yep.
And yes, they need those, but wouldn't it be much better if they also had their entire panoply? Fine. Yes, all of these tools can be lethal under the wrong circumstances, but we don't start now having taken all of these tools off the table by saying, okay, well, you can kill them. No. You give them back all the tools, and you actually start, arresting and booking and sentencing some of these fools.
Yes.
Like
You have to.
that's what you have to do.
You have to. Yep, I totally agree with that. Yeah, and I mean, frankly, if it were me, I would give a speech and I would say, the law has to be enforced. Here's why. It'd be lovely if we could do it without damaging anyone. We'll do our best, but don't expect nobody to be damaged, because this is the nature of the thing that we're up against. Here are the tools that we intend to use. They're not perfectly safe. The wise thing to do would be to obey the law and not destroy property or attack people.
And that speech having been made, stop being so damn nice to the people who are destroying life for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you for last hour's video of the Coyote Den. It's a nice diversion in these times. You're welcome.
Glad somebody liked it. I thought it's hard to get footage like that. We got very lucky
Amazing.
to find the den, and we were lucky to be able to get a camera on it quick enough, because she wasn't going to stick around.
Yeah. And we did get a picture, right? Or a slight bit of video of the first kit being pulled out as well.
Yes, we got
in
enough.
which the kid is more visible. So
More
it's clear
visible.
that there's two of them, because there's
Yep.
two different timestamps in all of this, right?
Yep.
Because I had looked in and I had said, oh, there's two. I thought there might be more movement, but there's two. And then when you had looked, you're like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's two. I was like, gosh, I really feel certain.
It may
And we know, because we have video evidence that there were two.
There were
And
definitely
only
two.
two.
There were definitely two.
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless she was carrying more than one in her mouth at the time, which I don't think she would have done.
Mm-mm.
And the first one, which we showed you, the kid is screaming, screaming, screaming. And in the one that we didn't show you, which actually came first, he's quiet.
Yeah.
Totally silent. Hopefully alive, presumably.
No,
she wouldn't have
he was
started
alive.
there.
No,
Yeah.
he is making noises, just not shrieking.
Yeah. Thanks, Mom. Punk band Bad Religion did an album, The Gray Race. Founder G. Gaffin is an evolutionary biologist. How long would it take for populations to breed to a new race? Would it increase genotype variation? So I don't know anything about the setup. I don't know anything about the album or anything.
Yeah, I don't either. I would say the thing about humans is that we have a special trick that allows us to behave like many species, though we are one. And so it already, the distinction between Bedouins and Inuits is a huge gap in terms of how these two populations function.
Yeah.
It's a species and beyond level gap, but within one species. So anyway, humans are nifty, and therefore the question is, does the thing you're asking even make sense, given how much human beings do within one genetic umbrella? It's a whole different realm, and it would be worth trying to ask the question with the right sort of schema. But it's this isn't well understood in the field, so
Yeah.
we don't have that set of terms.
And even if we were talking about rabbits, say, and therefore we're just using the word population rather than race, like subspecies, which races are not, but over in non-human space, we would be talking about different subspecies, and time isn't a sufficient variable. Like, you need to know degree of isolation, size of the population, amount of immigration, emigration, and mutation, and selection on various characters that might further isolate. Like, you need a lot more. That it can't just be about time. And then in humans, subspecies is a dicey term. Race is a dicier term, and it's a largely inaccurate rendering of what populations are. And with humans becoming global as long ago as we did, it's a really poor map for actual population level differences at the genetic level.
Yeah, I would say the amount of time given a set of circumstances necessary for two populations not to be able to understand each other would be a good proxy.
Humans.
Yeah.
To not to understand. So language.
Right.
Yeah. It's good. I know this word and I never know how to pronounce it. Can you take a look? Are you familiar with U.S. versus, is it Cruikshank?
Cruikshank.
Okay. The SCOTUS decision that acquitted white racists who committed the Colfax Massacre and opened the door to Jim Crow. It's part of a history of racist gun control laws that stood until 2008. I know of it, but not enough to say anything.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't
Yeah.
know it. But sounds important.
Mhm.
And of course, it has to exist because to have liberal gun laws and constitutional protections with as much racial tension as we have, you have to have some sort of mechanism for differential enforcement in order for the racist past to be what it is.
Yep.
So anyway, yes, there would have to be a history of this, and I'm surprised we don't know it, but we should look into it.
Yep. Could an ancestor to the current SARS-CoV-2 virus be similar enough to generate an immune response to the current virus and different enough to be much less lethal?
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Theoretically possible. Will we ever know? Wow, a lot of questions here. Okay, let's get through, say, 3 more.
Sure.
Happy birthday, Zach. By the way, Heather, there are over 100,000 black bears in Alaska alone. Okay, but I don't include Alaska and North America, just Canada.
100,000
Yeah.
black bears in Alaska.
That's amazing.
Alone.
That's incredible. I had obviously no idea.
I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you do love your bears.
I do love bears.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I sit corrected. Referring to the earlier comment about activists screenshotting super chats and using them against the talent, even if the majority are virtuous, one person spending $20 to make someone look bad is a cheap investment in deplatforming. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
I now understand the super chat part of it. And yeah, we've had a couple
Mhm.
weird questions, but by and large, our community of people in the chat is, as far as I know, by far the best anywhere on YouTube. YouTube is such a horror show, and by and large, we have very good people in the chat, and
Yeah.
we have very good moderators.
Mhm.
And anyway, I'm proud of what we got, messy as it is.
Okay. 2 more questions. What is your current thinking on relative vaccine safety? Heather, I believe you said that you would prefer a viral vector vaccine for yourself. Thoughts on the recent blood clot stories? That's a lot of questions in there. We already talked a little bit about the blood clot stuff. You know, I think it's like, I hope that the blood clot stories are like the seatbelts in the car. The vaccine is still affording greater safety than damage. I think pulling J&J or proposing that people should be cautious about J&J for 6 bad cases in over 6 million is an insane thing to have done. Those numbers make no sense. I still wish that we had many more years behind us of these vaccines before we were being expected to take them. We will be eligible to get vaccinated soon here in Oregon. And I hope J&J remains available and that we can wait as long as possible.
Yeah, I would say the number of ways in which this is unsafe are many, and it is clear, and we are not having a proper public discussion about it.
Yep.
You and I are having a proper discussion, but I don't hear it elsewhere. There's the personal safety dimension. There's the safety of this vaccination campaign. There is the danger of the way markets are interfacing with the various vaccines on offer. You know, is there a perverse incentive driving the claim that we may need a third booster? Is there a perverse incentive that results in proclamations about the danger of one vaccine versus another? Is there a perverse incentive preventing us from discussing both the long-term risks of these vaccines and the risk of affecting the pandemic in a way that will make things worse and not better? All of these things are absent from the discussion, and they exist only discussed on the fringe, and that's absurd. And in light of all of this, the idea that we are going to be forced with vaccine passports to accept vaccinations that have not been, about which no one has been honest about the hazards, is extremely distressing.
It's diabolical.
It's diabolical. And I would say, you know what? In a good regime, in a regime in which we did proper due diligence about vaccine safety, in which there were no perverse incentives surrounding the mythology about which ones are safe and how safe they are and all of that, I would be in favor of vaccine passports. But I am not at all in favor of them in the context of a system that will not discuss rationally what the actual hazards might be. And I don't think they're safe enough.
Last question. New York father pulls his daughter out of Brearley with a message to the whole school. Is the dam starting to break? Yeah, I have not read the letter. I'm aware of it. Certainly in the last month or two, from what I've seen, largely through the efforts of Barry Weiss and Caitlin Flanagan, the problems with the wokeness in the elite private schools, in particular, elite private secondary schools, is coming to a head. Is becoming really well known in some circles. That said, the rhetoric that we see in other places looks unchanged, as if that's not happening at all. So I don't know. I don't know what it takes. I know that, I think it was fall of 2019 that James Lindsay said that he thought it was happening. The dam was breaking. People were becoming aware of it. It's like, I don't think so, man. Like, I don't think it's where you think it is. And of course it didn't.
Yeah.
It only continued to get worse. So, there've been a lot of these moments. And I guess I don't want to get my hopes up.
Well, here's a frightening prospect.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. There are chances that we've hit bottom. It always seems like we might have, and then things just get stupider. But imagine that the elite schools wake up and the parents who get it, and there are likely to be many, successfully fight back. And then once again, we have another version of this trick that involves the distinction between private schools and public schools, right? Where we underfund the public schools. Those who can afford to send their kids to private schools don't suffer from having hobbled their kids in bad public schools. And it creates a self-reinforcing pattern of the distribution of opportunity that nobody needs to own up to having created. In other words, sabotage the public schools, privately subsidize the private schools so that they're better. And the point is, what is that? That's the wealthy hobbling other people's children so they can't compete.
Yeah. It's kind of the opposite at the moment. Like, the private schools are worse.
Are worse. But imagine that they come to their senses and suddenly the only schools that aren't insane are elite private schools, right? One can easily imagine that world because we've lived in it.
I guess. I guess I'm not sure why we're imagining the world that is the inverse of the one we're in right now, which is plenty bad enough. And
because wealthy people have the means to erect their own system if they need to, and that, in effect, seeing a novel version of an old game would not be surprising.
Something that will need to happen. So it was a father, right, that pulled his daughter out, that wrote this letter and pulled it out. And I think the dam is going to have to break with the mothers if that's going to happen. And, you're imagining that this amazing thing happens and then it becomes yet another reinforcement of class privilege.
Yep.
Rather than talk about the amazing thing having happened and then one of the possible immediate after effects. I think for that dam to break, the tougher parent in most situations to see this ideology for what it is and to resist it and to be disagreeable and to stand up to it and to say, I don't think so, not for me. Of course, I care about Black people. This is really uncomfortable. Why did I just lose all my friends? It's gonna be mothers. And I think, so far many of the examples we're seeing, like Barry Weiss posted a piece written by a teacher at an elite school on the East Coast this week who's standing up to this, a male teacher. And these are anecdotes, but I think what we need for the dam to break is for more women to stand up and say, actually, I'm going to change the expectation in the community that we don't do this, that this is actually this thing that we are all on board with is actually the diabolical thing, because it's just going to be necessary if things are going to change.
Yeah. So actually, I think you're making a very important point.
This is just apropos, as you know, and I think I mentioned maybe last week, I've been asked to write this commentary on a piece on historical relationships between women and men, and women and men, and all this, but like deep historical relationships between women and how it affects relationships today. And I've been thinking about the different kinds of competition that men engage in and that women engage in, and what that looks like when men and women interact, and how much we pretend that that deep history doesn't exist back when, and to our peril, right? And so much of the literature is just insanely stupidly written. The scientific literature, of course, because it always is. It says things like, well, women don't compete. Women say they don't like to compete, therefore they don't compete. Women, when asked to engage in this, doodly competitive thing, said they didn't want to play, therefore women don't compete. It's like, oh my God, like, of course women compete. Women compete all the time just as much as men, but differently. And in a word, it tends to be that men tend to compete overtly and women tend to compete covertly. And there are so many downstream effects of this that are so important, that it will also be, and this is something, I think this is new, I think no one has said this before, it will also be harder to opt out of covert than overt games, than covert than overt competition, because as a man, you can say, yep, not playing, and you might get chided for it, you might get shamed for it, but everyone knows he's not playing, he's doing something different, right? And if the competition is covert, it's all behind the back, and it's gossip, and it's sidelining, and it's social, and you can't just say I'm not playing.
Yeah,
you're like, oh yes you are. We're not going to let you not play. So
she says she's not playing. Oh, that's a really good move.
And sometimes it will be.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes that is a move actually. So anyway, I'm wrapped up in this space anyway. But in order for this dam to break, we need women who are somewhat dominant in whatever little social hierarchies they're in at these schools to actually make the moves to make it the desirable position to be standing up to this. Because until that happens, those few dads who stand up and do it are not going to make the difference, I don't think.
So I think I just want to put three things on the list here. You've mentioned disagreeableness, which is more common in
Exactly.
men.
I did so intentionally.
Right.
Yes.
Which is a necessary skill to say no in the face of something like this.
Right.
There is the question of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
This movement hijacks compassion, and compassion is going to be more easily hijacked in women, very likely. It's probably a more intensely developed skill. The nature of being female being one that requires this, more directly for mothering, for example.
Right.
And then there's the question about this distinction between males and females in terms of the preferences for the types of things they engage in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the classic way to describe it is people versus things, where men tend to be more interested in things, women tend to be more interested in people. And the thing is, people is the thing is, I said it. I said it because I'm masculine. No, the thing is that the world of things is a world of conservation laws that is unforgiving, right? And so the world of conservation laws is one in which one discovers that an illogical system does not function, right? A world of people does not necessarily have conservation laws in the same sense. And so there's a question about whether there is a gender split here that might be setting us up for disaster.
Yeah, no, don't feel like you have to cut it short. I just have about 8 things to say in response. So we have talked about understanding something about the physical world as opposed to being entirely based in the social world,
Exactly.
and that that does map somewhat onto things versus people. And so, given that it is a well replicated psychological finding that men are, and including babies, including other cultures, right, like more interested in things on average tendency, and women in people and animals, right, that would also suggest that many women have more of their entire life invested in the relationships that they have, and so it actually comes at a cost to a higher percentage of their life to go against the crowd. Whereas men, if they're engaged with these things that actually are meaningful to them, they can go to their damn shop, be like, okay, well, I stood up to that, and now I get to tinker, or whatever it is.
Right.
And, it's a caricature, but
it's not your whole world.
It's not your entire world collapsing. So they're just I haven't actually found even the typical character trait by gender that goes against this model. Like, it all just falls, which makes it, this is one of the few things I'm like, God, did someone really smart devise this to, capture women and then take out a whole society? Because this seems so deviously perfect to prey on many of the best characteristics of women and turn them into the worst characteristics for society.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to even say these things out loud, but at some level, this does, the whole woke ideology feels like it has dragged civilization into the dynamics of a dysfunctional marriage, right? It feels, it just does. And
yeah.
I don't like saying it. On the other hand, it's not like everything isn't at stake. We're actually talking about, the dumbest policy proposals one could conceive of, and yet we are entertaining them because nobody's in a position to say, actually, you can't abolish the police. Here's why. End of story. Right? That's what you need to say. Right? Mm-hmm. Sorry, abolishing the police, not on the table. Here's why. Mm-hmm. So anyway, yeah, we need more disagreeable women.
On it. All right.
You can only be one disagreeable woman.
I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
All right. That is it. This is a chaotic, weird day today. Both of us really want to be outside, so we're going to encourage you to get outside as soon as possible, even if it's the middle of the night. Why not? Do it. In the meantime, subscribe, like this video, this channel, the Clips channel. Consider joining me at my Patreon at Heather Hying, where right now you can pose questions that we may get to in our next private Q&A. Consider joining Bret at his Patreon. Lots more to be said, but anything else?
Achieve awesomeness.
Do that.
All right. See ya.